Good evening, everybody. This is Monica Guzman coming to you live once again on a weekend. And technically, it is 4th of July on the East Coast. So happy Independence Day, America. In 2021, you've made it one more year. Let's see how many more we can we can preserve, because it's been an exciting day. Uh, it was announced that apparently African Vanessa Williams will be performing the African national anthem during tomorrow evening's 4th of July Independence Day celebration for Juneteenth, the newest federal holiday brought to you by the 1% of the population residing on American soil that isn't American. And we saw this coming, right? This is not a surprise. This was the logical next step after Chuck Schumer, not American, proudly announced that Congress or the Senate or whoever decides American holidays made Juneteenth official. And I saw this coming. Personally, I saw this coming last year. So, as you all know, the Los Angeles Dodgers are no longer the Los Angeles Dodgers. Starting in 2017, they basically became the Andrew Friedman Tampa Dodgers. And so that organization is now fully run by the Jewish community and a couple of Africans. So last year, that organization was among those who declared on their own that they would give their employees the day off. There were a couple of others, but the one I personally remember is that organization. Now, to be fair, I have looked at Dodgers history, and even though Peter O'Malley accomplished a lot of things, and he's not Jewish, I think he's Irish, but he could be one of those Irish that go against their heritage. The Dodgers organization did a lot of thrived under the O'Malley leadership, but eventually it sank. The Dodgers were the first MLB team to be owned by a corporation because the O'Malley family sold out, and then it was just downhill from there. They claimed that the only way for MLB teams to compete was to have corporations owning them. And to the inevitability of what MLB has turned into today, with one of my topics for tonight, the Boston Red Sox, who are owned essentially by a corporation. And the makeup of the main leadership is something I'm going to discuss tonight. So tonight is the final installment of leading up to 4th of July. I'm focusing on Boston. And Boston has probably, next to Philadelphia, the richest history in America. It's the site of the Boston Tea Party. It is the site of the Boston Massacre. It is the site of the stamp tax. It was impacted by the stamp tax. The Battle of Lexington and Concord. And then personally, it's something that interests me is the Boston Irish, because I mean, the Irish aren't too keen on other races. And I understand, because the Irish have a history of being treated badly by the English. So maybe their apprehension toward other races comes from the way they've been treated historically, namely by the English. So, look, I know that when it comes to the races, none of us are going to be BFFs, but we can definitely be friends. And I like the Irish. I have a lot of respect for like the New York Irish, who were mainly your nurses, your teachers, your firefighters, your policemen. I respect that when you talk about grassroots movements, the Irish truly exemplify that. They exuded, and it came naturally to them. The Italians did something similar, but I really believe that the Irish took it to another level. And I believe that's what the rest of us need to be doing. Mexicans in LA kind of have that going on, except when it comes to the teachers, those are your Latinx people, which are an embarrassment to Mexicans. I don't know how the other Latino communities feel about that, but personally, as a Mexican, it's embarrassing. And those are definitely some groups that we need to just kind of leave behind. There was a Latinx Mexican representative causing some sort of storm because she claimed that Mexicans need to be included in country music, which is just stupid. We've got to call this stuff out within our tribes, right? Like, it's just stupidity at this point, and we need to just push it off to the side and leave it behind where it'll die off on its own. Right, pre-nanny state, that's what used to happen. The stupidity used to die off, but thanks to the nanny state, we're forced to live among it because the non-American population insist on keeping it alive. But really what they're doing is they're using them as science experiments, because the 1% of the population that controls the American government, several corporations, is weak. The Jewish community is physically weak. And that's what I was trying to lay down the seeds of a couple of streams ago when I was talking about surgery. Again, Americans went 300 years thriving. They spread out across this area of North America just fine. Without cars, without the internet, without electricity, without phones, they figured it out. And then in the 1900s, stuff went sideways because we had World War I and World War II. Someone had to fill the vacuum, and it happens to be the Jewish community who filled it. And they've teamed up with the African population since the early 1900s. It really took hold at integration in 1947 with MLB, and then it went full-fledged with the civil rights movements of the 1960s, and here we are today. So, so Boston today, even today, is being attacked by the Jewish community, who I believe is that they haven't been able to conquer this historical America. I did see several tweets in regards to what happened in Massachusetts. A group of Moors was crossed Massachusetts on their way to Maine, where Maine houses some of their training sites. And so you have the Jerusalem Post, the audacity of them to post pictures of white men with Confederacy images behind them. If you watch the video that was recorded by the representative of the Moors, he's clearly a dark-skinned African. He might, if you just saw him on the street, he could be African, or he could be Muslims. Because, like Colin Kaepernick, for example, is half white, half African, but he identifies African, and I believe he's converted to Muslim, the Muslim religion. So sometimes it's difficult to tell them apart. I mean, look, when it comes to Latinos, I can't tell a Salvadorian from a Guatemalan. And I know it's offensive to them, but I mean, can you tell a Mexican apart from, I don't even know, like an Ecuadorian? In some cases, you can't because Mexicans. So I was corrected by someone when Mexicans are mestizo now, but we're not Indian. We descend from Aztecs and the Mayans who got mixed with French and your Spaniards. And that's why in Mexico City, you will find blue-eyed, blonde, fair-skinned Mexicans because they descend from like the French. And then someone like me probably has some Spanish lineage. I'm a little more fair skinned, but I still have my dark hair and my dark eyes. So look, it is what it is. But nonetheless, you have the Jerusalem Post. I mean, this is a direct attack on Americans and Boston. Posting this tweet specifically came out, Jerusalem Post at 1:25 p.m. And it's got white dudes in tactical gear. So this is part of this, again, I think it's a psyop. But I'm going to take this a step further. So Boston is constantly under attack by the Jewish community and the African community that they teamed up with. Back in July 23rd, the Boston Red Sox organization decided to hang up a Black Lives Matter sign across the street from their ballpark. And then you've got Kyrie Irving continuing to attack Boston, calling Americans racist, specifically Bostonians. Kyrie Irving, we already know, likes to fly off the handle. He says a lot of stuff. He is the one that believes that the late rapist Kobe Bryant should be the new logo of the NBA. And in that specific video, I took a quote where he's specifically talking about for African culture, for them. So his concern is just Africans, not Americans. And it's fine. Obviously, he's entitled to his opinion, but we are also allowed to push back against it. And so why so much hate against Boston? So I looked at the demographics of Boston. In 2020, Boston came in at 52% American white. Now, in that percentage, so I don't know how the census separates these things. In one subcategory of the demographics, the census has Boston at 52% white, 25% African. But then under that, they've got Boston at 44.5% white alone. And then they've got 20% Hispanic. Now, I don't know if when the census says Hispanic, if they're counting the Dominicans in this percentage. And that, for me, is an important distinction, given that Dominicans descend 90% from African slaves. So technically, those Dominicans are not Hispanic. If anything, you can categorize them as Africans. And for my purposes, this is an extremely important distinction because MLB promotes Dominicans, specifically Dominicans. And I wanted to know why. And I believe it's the lineage that Dominicans carry that MLB is basically partnering Dominicans with Africans. So they could form a coalition, for example, and then eventually would pay to an African majority in MLB. Because, and again, important for my purposes, an important distinction. So also, Boston is 22% Irish, and the Irish get attacked a lot because, again, the Irish have a history in America of being protected. But again, I believe it comes from the fact that England treated them so badly, and then the Irish were treated as second-class citizens until about the 1850s. It changed after the Civil War for them when they really started to make an impression. They started to show their intelligence. The first Irish Catholic mayor of Boston was voted in the 1850s, and that's kind of when things started to change, when they started to show that yes, in fact, they are intelligent, they are European. But I'll get into that a little bit later. So I'm going to be bringing in several facets into tonight's discussion. And again, everything is important. Okay, so let's start with the representation of the Boston Red Sox. So the opening day lineup for the Boston Red Sox organization in 2021 was Puerto Rican, Mexican, American, Aruba, Dominican, American, Puerto Rico, USA. So this is definitely a better opening day lineup than the Cleveland Indians put out in 2020, where it was like one American and several Dominicans and Puerto Ricans. Now, mind you, the Mexican in the Boston lineup, opening day lineup for 2021 is the Mexican that played for Andrew Friedman and was a participant in the Gabe Kapler fiasco that took place under Andrew Friedman's tutelage in the AAA, when they were in AAA or AA. Julio Urias was also around. A girl was essentially assaulted, and Alex Verdugo filmed it. Yet Alex Verdugo was allowed by Andrew Friedman and Gabe Kapler to remain in the Dodger ranks. Now, right now, when people under the Trevor Bauer stuff still continue to call Andrew Friedman's organization Stan Kasten, Mark Walter, Magic Johnson. It's hilarious that Andrew Friedman and all those guys, apologists, continue to call the organization world class, even though they're continually churning out these domestic violence participants. Let's call you Julio Urias' thing an outburst of anger. So under Andrew Friedman, you've got Julio Urias, Alex Verdugo, Gabe Kapler, and now Trevor Bauer. And I'm sure there are a couple of other questionable characters that have come through the organization under Andrew Friedman's leadership. But I haven't taken the time to go through every single one. But nonetheless, Alex Verdugo, like Julio Urias, they don't represent Mexicans in my eyes. Because again, just like Cashman and the Steinbrenner Yankees, what they're trying to do is they're trying to turn these domestic violence suspensions, questionable characters, steroid users into heroes. They're trying to get you to worship degeneracy, because once you worship degeneracy, you are no longer pure. You are a target for somebody to tell you, well, when they were winning, you were right there cheering them on. And I've seen it with somebody who was attacking the Cubs organization analytics. Mike Petriello was quickly shot back at this dude, saying, well, when the Cubs won their championship, you weren't complaining about the analytics. So you don't want to put yourself in a position where they can throw that in your face. Reject the degeneracy, reject these domestic violence suspension guys. You've got to reject it, because once you participate in it, they're going to throw it back in your face. So how does an organization put together this kind of lineup? And what's going on exactly with the Boston Red Sox right now? So the main leadership of the current Boston Red Sox organization is John Henry is a co-owner of the Boston Red Sox, and LeBron, he was the person that brought on domestic terrorist LeBron James. And LeBron James joined a couple of months after the Boston Red Sox organization under John Henry hung the Black Lives Matter sign across the street from the ballpark. So one thing obviously led to another, right? The Boston Red Sox declaration of their love for this domestic terrorist organization led to LeBron James joining the organization. And obviously, the fact that LeBron James has joined the organization tells you the direction that they're going to keep going in. Now, before I outline the rest of the principal leadership of the Boston Red Sox, I have to point out that the Boston Red Sox was the last, at this point, MLB team to integrate Africans into the organization as players. So the first African didn't play for the Boston Red Sox until 1961. And to that, I say, who cares? I'm going to prove probably in August, when I kick off my MLB Focus streams, that Africans haven't added anything. They haven't added any value to MLB. They are, what Africans in MLB are a series of narratives, and in many cases clowns. And I mean, Bo Jackson was a clown. I mean, they try to sell him as a wonderful athlete, but when you look at the statistics, the American baseball pioneers were far better athletes than, obviously, several players that have come after them of any race. But I mean, Hank Aaron was just a compiler. Hank Aaron, okay, he got a bunch of hits, but he also had far more at bats than Babe Ruth did. And he accomplished, I mean, technically he accomplished less. He ended up, even though he had several more at bats, he ended up with one championship, because winning wasn't the focus. Compiling statistics was the focus of Hank Aaron. And then you've got Willie Mays. Same thing, just a narrative, a dude who did tricks in the outfield at best, the way that Ozzie Smith just did tricks in the infield. And Ken Griffey didn't do tricks, but I mean, at best, he just compiled stats. It's like they couldn't find another African in that era to push forward, so they chose Ken Griffey Jr. to do that. MLB doesn't have a Michael Jordan. Again, to me, I know that in The Last Dance, they didn't go into detail about the things that Michael Jordan experienced as an African in North Carolina. And I haven't researched it on my own either. But however it was, he overcame it, and he is the greatest of all time in the NBA. He overcame it, and if he has any bitterness over what happened to him in North Carolina, I personally haven't detected it in any of his interviews. I know he's working on stuff now because whether he's been pressured into it the way Tiger Woods gets pressured into it, I mean, I don't know. But to me, Michael Jordan, I have mem- great memories of Michael Jordan's basketball career, and I never felt like he was just representing Africans. He was a basketball player, and my guy friends were all about him. They were, I mean, at that time, this is pre-internet. We would go to the library to read the magazines, and or they would pick up a copy. And I grew up during a different era, so they would pick up a copy of a sports magazine that had Michael Jordan on the cover, for example, and they would read it during lunchtime, or they would read it during one of our breaks, and they were in awe of Michael Jordan. Even in LA, they picked Michael Jordan over Magic Johnson, like hands down. And so I personally have a lot of respect for Michael Jordan, at least what he did during his basketball career. So, but I guess Michael Jordan is the exception. And MLB doesn't have a Michael Jordan, as far as I'm concerned. MLB has a lot of Africans whose task it was to compile stats to overthrow the American baseball pioneers from the leaderboards. And although they succeeded in some categories, as I'm going to prove, Babe Ruth's career is the ultimate career to have. I don't want to give it away right now, but if you look at my chart that I have pinned on my Twitter account, the career and statistics speaks for itself. If you want to deny that, you're just an apologist and you are a denier who insists on sticking their head in the sand. And that's not my problem. So whatever. Okay, so the Boston Red Sox leadership is represented by John Henry, who was an asthmatic when he was growing up. So maybe his family has good genes, but he didn't pick them up. He's a nerd at best, and I think it stems from his poor physical state, or poor health state. So he was asthmatic, indicates poor immunity, poor health. The co-principal owner is Jewish. The president and CEO was a classmate of Theo Epstein. Theo Epstein is Jewish. And Theo Epstein mentored Jared Porter, who is a total degenerate. And nonetheless, he had what was supposed to be a long career in MLB, which shows you the culture of MLB under your Robert Manfred, Theo Epstein's, John Henry's, Andrew Friedman's, and that long list of Jewish community members in MLB. This is the culture that they've built. No getting away from it. Facts are facts. The chief baseball officer is Jewish, Chaim Bloom. The GM, Brian O'Halloran, I didn't find a lot on him. Um, at best, he's a nerd. Where he comes from, I'm not 100% sure, but he could be one of those Detroit Irish, like the dude that went after Cap Anson. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Detroit Irishman, who was a member of like the CCP or something, like the American version of the CCP, discovered this thing about Cap Anson 100 years later. You, you cowards wait until they pass away, and you wait like the cowards that went after Ty Cobb waited for him to pass away. You wait obviously for Cap Anson to be well and gone before you go after him. You fucking cowards. But again, so the incident with Cap Anson took place in 1883, and the Detroit Irishman made the discovery about Cap Anson in 1983. 100 years after the incident. I don't think that's a coincidence, you fucking cowards. Unlike what we're doing, we are talking about this while you guys are still alive. We're pushing back while you're still alive. We may get canceled off social media because you guys run it, but that's not going to stop us from continuing to research, from continuing to question, from continuing to discuss, to learn, to make comparison and contrasts. You cowards. You cowards. The special assistants to the Boston Red Sox organization, which is mostly run by the Jewish community, are Pedro Martinez, a Dominican, and Steroids David Ortiz, another Dominican. Tim Wakefield, I didn't bother to research. He looks like a white guy. So I don't know what kind of contributions he's making, given the leadership that runs the Boston Red Sox organization, who has tried to demonize the previous owner, who they claim is racist just because he wouldn't integrate Africans, which is, it's nonsense. Again, what is Jackie Robinson really famous for? He's just famous for being African. He didn't, that play with Yogi Berra, Jackie Robinson was out. But they sell it as this moment in time where Jackie Robinson solidified his greatness. Maybe Jackie Robinson was a great athlete, but he also went to UCLA, which is basically the southern version of Berkeley. UCLA has churned out Trevor Bauer. So UCLA is just as questionable as Berkeley. And I understand that other people went to Berkeley too. I'm specifically targeting Kamala Harris's education at Berkeley. Look, I studied political affairs, and I can tell you that when I got out of college, I had no tangible skills. Given I had the ability to think critically and to reason and to use logic, but my degree didn't serve me any purpose in gaining a career afterwards. I gained my skills, the skills that I have today, I gained them on my own post-college, and they are not around political science. So that's what I'm saying. In terms of Berkeley, Kamala Harris getting a law degree there, well, let's be honest, what did she really learn? Come on. So anyways, so why did the Boston Red Sox organization hang a Black Lives Matter banner across the street from the ballpark? Because it's run by Jewish members of the community, and because so again, I'm trying to tie things together to help in a logical manner that you guys will understand too. The Boston Red Sox organization is now run by Jewish community members. The Jewish community believes in critical theory. Critical race theory is an offshoot of critical theory. So I understand Americans and Europeans who have made the argument that critical race theory is specifically anti-white. And you're not wrong. But the missing piece to that is the Jewish community could cross the border from America to Mexico and do the exact same thing. The goal of critical theory is to overthrow the majority and hand it over to the minority. The minority that the Jewish community has chosen is the African community. Exactly why, I'm still not 100% sure. In the Gone with the Wind documentary, the director and the producers were Jewish, and they specifically state that in the watermelon seed scene with the African girl, they cut out a portion of that because it continued a stereotype of Africans. Something about watermelon and Africans and slavery is some sort of stereotype. And one of them specifically states that they felt a kinship to Africans because the Jews went through the Holocaust in Germany and the Africans went through slavery in America. So somehow that links them together. So I guess that's why they've chosen to team up with Africans. I personally question if they specifically teamed up with Africans because Africans have the lowest IQ of all the races. And this isn't me picking on anybody. We have to have these conversations. If you can specifically push back on my arguments with reason and logic, as Stefan Molyneux usually states in his videos, do it. Do it. But you've got to use reason and logic. You can't use your emotions because that's not enough anymore. We are heading towards something pretty bad. If it unfolds the way it looks like it could unfold, we're heading towards something pretty serious. Cassandra Fairbanks has stated a civil war, and I'm assuming that when she says civil war, she's talking about a full-blown violent civil war. I don't know. At this point, we have to prepare for everything, right? We have to prepare even if nothing happens because we still have to continue pushing back. Okay, so critical theory is something that the Frankfurt School brought over to American soil when they ran away from Hitler. They brought it to Columbia University. So that right there should make you question who was running Columbia University at that point. They basically welcomed them with open arms. So Columbia University is questionable right from the beginning. And again, critical theory seeks to overthrow the majority. Again, they can walk over to Mexico, do the exact same thing to Mexico that they're doing to Americans in America. They seek to overthrow the majority. If they make their way over to Japan, they would seek to overthrow the Japanese and hand it over. I don't know who they would hand it over to at that point, they can go to any country, Romania, Bulgaria, Russia, uh, Australia. They can go over to any country and overthrow the majority because that's what critical theory does. You can make the argument that calling it critical race theory is specifically anti-white. But again, it's any country. They can take this with them and overthrow the majority. Mexico, Argentina, Brazil. I mean, a lot of these Southern American countries are in trouble anyway, but they could do it there too. Whatever South America country's still stable, they could do it to them too, is the point that I want to make sure people take away. So critical theory is an offshoot of Marxism. Now, Karl Marx may have been anti-Jewish. That's fine. I'm not or he wasn't, because I don't have enough to truly dig that deep. But even if he was anti-Jewish, it didn't stop, again, the Jewish community from adopting his theories, his philosophies. What they did is they took Marxism and turned it into critical theory. So I'm going to turn the tables. So what's happening right now in America is critical race theory, but it's also critical theory. And when you watch TV, if you still watch TV, which I do not recommend anybody watch TV anymore, and you're not watching TV anymore because the ratings are in the toilet. But if you turn on the TV and you flip through the channels for maybe an hour, you're going to notice the overrepresentation of Africans, and so that led me to look at something new today. So gay conversion therapy is what I looked up, because I remember watching an episode of Criminal Minds several years ago where they bust up a conversion therapy site. And when they find the pupils at this site, they are specifically in chairs watching film. So one of the tools used in conversion therapy is a bombardment of images. So they basically make someone feel discomfort or pain while showing them homosexual images to link discomfort with the thought of homosexuality. But where did homosexual conversion therapy come from? It came from the same place that brought you psychology, from Germany. Now, a lot of us know that the Weimar Jews blended into German society from the mid-1800s to the late 1800s, before Hitler came into power. And I recommend you guys watch Rouge's live stream from today, because he covered some of the things that I was planning, some of the themes that I'm digging into tonight, some of the topics that I'm digging into tonight. Okay, so psychology came from Germany too. So that's why what the heck was happening in Germany that all these experiments on humans were being birthed? Like William Wundt, who set up the first research lab in Germany in 1879. And then you've got this guy in Germany around the same time. And if you want to know where I got this specific information for gay conversion therapy, I got it at history.com. June 22nd, 2018 was the original date that they published this specific information, and then they updated it June 2018. In the late 19th century, psychiatrists and doctors began to label same-sex desire in medical terms and looking for ways to reverse it. In 1899, a German psychiatrist electrified the audience at a conference on hypnosis with a bold claim: he had turned a gay man straight. It took 45 sessions, a few trips to a brothel. Albert von Schrenck-Notzing bragged. Through hypnosis, he claimed he had manipulated the man's sexual impulses, diverting them from his interest in men to a lasting desire for women. Now, I couldn't find anything that specifically told me if he was German or if he was Weimar Jewish. When you go down further in this same article, you will find there were plenty of theories as to why people were homosexual. For Eugene Steinach, a pioneering Austrian endocrinologist, homosexuality was rooted in a man's testicles. Now, although this man was Austrian, I looked up, again, my specific purpose was to figure out, was he German, or was he a Weimar Jew? Eugene was a Jew. So a lot of these experiments that were conducted on humans in Germany came from Jews. So for me, in MLB, when all this engineering of so-called baseball players takes place, I'm no longer shocked that it comes from the Jews. These are just facts, right? I mean, they brag about analytics, and you've got the Steinbrenner Yankees bragging about the pitcher gas station that they set up during spring training. So, I mean, this isn't shocking, right? We can discuss this stuff and figure out what's going on. Why would you do this? And I have my theories. So, given that some of these homosexual conversion therapies came from Germany, possibly from Weimar Jews, how do we know that Jews on American soil aren't condemning gay conversion therapy on mentally ill people who are confused about their biology, but using the logic of bombarding individuals with images to get Americans to hate themselves? And they have successfully, I don't know if we want to go to 50%, but they've successfully gotten 50% of Americans to hate the fact that they're white. And how did they do it? They've done it through bombarding you with images, negative images of white people in situations where we know specifically the perpetrators are Africans. A video floating around Twitter today shows you an American military brigade marching in a cadence, and they're being led by an African woman. And these guys are mostly white. I saw at least one African in the crew, and they unfortunately look extremely pathetic. Um, but what does that do? So again, I've been rewatching several programs, and so I always, and I'm not the only one who's noticed it. Other people have pointed it out, but have pointed it out. It became almost a running joke. Oh, the detective is always an African, right? Or the policeman is always an African, or the doctor's always an African. Um, because in a lot of the movies where the detective is an African, it we saw it as comedy because we know that in real detectives were Americans. So, but it's something that they've continued to do. Maybe this conversion therapy from believing that Africans hold authority over Americans didn't work on Gen X. Maybe we were too aloof. I don't know how well it worked on Gen X, but it's definitely apparently working on Gen Z, and it definitely worked on boomers. Um, Again, but this is another example of the Jewish community attacking a specific tool or person, but using it to their advantage anyway. They attack Karl Marx as an anti-Semite, and again, maybe he was. I don't know. I don't care either. But yet they ran with his ideas, his ideology, his philosophy. They attack Catholics and Christians for using gay conversion therapies that they probably came up with in the first place, but they're using them on the American public through television, through entertainment, through sports, through what else? Through bureaucracy. I can tell you that in daily life, there are places where Africans are prominent, even though they're only 12% of the total population. It could be a city thing too. It might not be the case in rural suburban areas, but definitely in cities, I see it. Um, and again, a good example is Tom Brady versus Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to be honest. During the Super Bowl, the Tampa Bay Bucks defense could have easily taken down Patrick Mahomes in the first half, but I feel like they kind of took it easy on him to not make him look bad. They finally went after him in the second half. Now, I did not watch the Super Bowl the previous year, but based on what I saw in the last Super Bowl, I believe that Jimmy Garoppolo purposely made that throwing mistake to help Patrick Mahomes become a championship. So it's or a champion. So it's basically what happened with Mookie Betts and MLB. I believe that the Dodgers, the Tampa Friedman Dodgers organization threw the 2018 World Series to make Mookie Betts look like he's something special. When in reality, it turns out that he's just another cheater. But because he's African, MLB couldn't hold him accountable for what he probably did and what the organization did under Puerto Rican Alex Cora. Now, that's why the Astros have borne the brunt of what happened in 2017. You couldn't Mookie Betts and the Red Sox organization is just as guilty of cheating as the 2017 Astros were. But the difference is that your Carlos Correa is Puerto Rican And Alex Cora is Puerto Rican, and the other guy that don't even bring up his name for Hall of Fame consideration was either Puerto Rican or he must have been Puerto Rican because the Dominicans are being held up by MLB due to their African descendancy. So I believe Jimmy Garoppolo purposely threw the Super Bowl to make Patrick Mahomes an engineer champion so that the narrative around Patrick Mahomes could continue. Same way that the narrative around Mookie Betts could continue. Now, I am not trying to pick on these players or these guys because let's face it, they're not really athletes. They're narratives. I am not trying to pick on them level. The issue is that they're obviously willing participants and they're profiting off of this. So we get to bring into question your character as a professional athlete. I'm not trying to stomp on anybody on a personal level. The professional athlete level, we can't turn a blind eye to these things anymore because it's obvious that the agenda is just going to keep being carried out. It's not going to stop anytime soon. So let's go to. So I've established that the Boston Red Sox organization is Jewish, and the Jewish community on American soil has teamed up with Africans. The Jewish community on American soil abides by critical theory, and critical theory seeks to overthrow the majority on whatever land they're on at that time. They call Tom Yaki a racist simply because he wouldn't sign Africans to the professional level. So what? Again, as far as I'm concerned, Africans haven't contributed. They haven't contributed to MLB the way Michael Jordan contributed to the NBA. And I don't think they ever will. Hank Aaron is your original compiler. Willie Mays was just a dude doing tricks in the outfield. Bo Jackson was definitely a dude doing tricks in the outfield. Ozzie Smith was a dude doing tricks in the infield. Maybe by Negro League standards, that is outstanding, but by American baseball pioneer standards, it's not. And we don't have to be upset over the differences in culture. If MLB wants to become the Negro Leagues 2.0, go for it. We can take the pre-integration portions of American baseball and we will celebrate Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, Cap Anson, Cy Young, Honus Wagner, Walter Johnson, Christy Mathewson, the way that they deserve to be celebrated as great Americans, especially Cy Young, who is total quintessential American, a farmer from Ohio who didn't hang out with city girls. He loved his wife. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to bear him a child, but he spent his last years hanging out with Little Leaguers. And when he passed away, I mean, reading his biography, it was just, even I felt what they must have felt when he passed away. It was moving, and I'm going to have the opportunity to discuss that in August on camera. I'm definitely looking forward to it. There's something special that took place in August several decades ago with for Cy Young. We're going to celebrate it the way we celebrated Babe Ruth Day 2021. I came across a stream two guys saying Babe Ruth Day is a thing, and I thought that was extremely cool. So hopefully some of you out there will help me do the same thing with Cy Young in August. And I'll tweet about it as we get closer to the day. So Boston and the Irish. Let me talk a little bit about the Irish in America. And again, I think what the Irish did in this country is really cool, and we can take a page out of their book as far as they became firefighters, policemen, nurses, and teachers. So they were really protectionist, and they held noble civil servant positions. And I think we can all take a lesson from that. Definitely, I would like to see more guys become volunteer firefighters. I think that is a character building profession. Because it's not like policemen where you guys are being faced with people who are trying to shoot you. I mean, firefighters, at least in California, answer all calls that come to them. So even though California burns a lot, California firefighters don't just answer fire-related calls. They answer like medical emergency calls. And I don't know if they still do the getting the cat out of the tree stuff, but I would like to see more young men trained to become firefighters. I think it's a character builder. I think you can take a lot from it. It falls in line with what Ben Franklin did, and I think it will help you become better gatekeepers for your neighborhoods and your households. So for that, I definitely respect the Irish for that. So again, out of my favorite American history textbook, let me read to you a little bit about the Irish. For a generation from 1793 to 1815, war raged across Europe. Ruinous as it was on the continent, the fighting brought unprecedented prosperity to the long-suffering landsmen of Ireland, groaning since the 12th century under the yoke of British rule. For as Europe's fields lay fallow, irrigated only by the blood of its farmers, Ireland fed the hungry armies that ravened for food as well as territory. Irish farmers planted every available acre, interspersing the lowly potato amongst their fields of grain. With prices for food products ever mounting, tenant farmers reaped a temporary respite from their perpetual struggle to remain on the land. Most landlords, satisfied by the prosperity, and so relaxed their pressure on tenants. Others, stymied by the absence of British police forces that had been stripped of manpower to fight in Europe, had little means to enforce eviction notices. But the peace that brought solace to the battle-scarred Europe changed all this. After 1815, war-inflated wheat prices plummeted by half. Hard-pressed landlords resolved to leave vast fields unplanted. Assisted now by a string British constabulary, they vowed to sweep the pesky peasants from entire acreage. Many of those forced to leave sought work in England itself. Some went to America. Then in 1845, a blight that ravaged the potato crop sounded the final knell for the Irish peasantry. The resultant famine spread desolation throughout the island. In 5 years, more than 1 million people died. Another million sailed for America. Of the immigrants, most were young and literate in English, the majority under 35 years old. Families typically pooled money to send strong young sons to the New World, where they would earn wages to pay the fares for those who remained behind. These famine Irish mostly remain in the port cities of the Northeast, abandoning the farmer's life for the squalor and congestion of urban metropolis. The Irish newcomers had poor preparation indeed for urban life. They found progress up the economic ladder painfully slow. Their work as domestic servants or construction laborers was dull and arduous, and mortality rates astoundingly high. Escape from the potato famine hardly guaranteed a long life to the Irish American. A gray bearded Irishman was a rare sight in the 19th century America. Most of the new arrivals toiled as day laborers. A fortunate few owned boarding houses or saloons where their dispirited countrymen sought solace in the bottle. For Irish born women, opportunities were still scarcer. They worked mainly as domestic servants, but it was their Roman Catholicism more than ever, more than even their penury or their perceived fondness for alcohol that earned the Irish the distrust and resentment of their neighbor born Protestant American neighbors. The cornerstone of social and religious life for Irish immigrants was the parish. Worries about safeguarding their children's faith inspired the construction of parish schools, financed by the pennies of struggling working class Irish parents. If Ireland's green fields scarcely equipped their sons and daughters for the scrap and scramble of economic life in American cities, life in the old country nevertheless had instilled in them an aptitude for politics. Irish Catholic resistance against centuries of British Anglican domination had instructed many old country Irish in the way of mass politics. That political experience readied them for the boss system of the political machines in Americans' northeastern cities. The boss's local representatives met each newcomer soon after landing in America. Asking only for votes, the machine supplied coal in wintertime, food, and help with the law. Irish voters soon became the bulwark of Democratic Party, reliably supporting the party of Jefferson and Jackson in cities like New York and Boston. As Irish American, like New York's Honest John Kelly, themselves became bosses, white collar jobs in government service opened up to the Irish. They became building inspectors, aldermen, and even policemen. An astonishing irony for people driven from their homeland by the nightsticks and bayonets of British police. Again, every culture can do this. Americans can do this. The Irish descendants can do this. And we need to do this. Again, we can find, I believe that if every culture, for example, Mexicans, if we push our Latinx losers aside, we can figure out how to restart America peacefully and without too many problems. Something that does need to happen, as far as I'm concerned, we've got to get Mexicans off of welfare. And Mexico is very violent. If we figure out how to tone down the violence in Mexico, we can encourage the smartest, most intelligent Mexicans to start returning to Mexico so that they can become the architects of the Mexico of tomorrow. We know that stuff is falling down in America, right? Stuff is falling down in Mexico too. So Mexico requires engineers as well. And it's obviously best if those engineers are Mexican. So rebuild, natives can rebuild their own countries, not none of this nation building stuff, right? We can encourage Indians to return to India. We can encourage Mexicans to return to Mexico to rebuild. And then what will be left here are Americans that want to rebuild America. But that's going to take a lot of people pulling in the same direction. And then obviously Africans will be encouraged to go to Africa because, like your Whoopi Goldbergs, she's got her bags packed anyway. So, go. I'm pretty sure that some Americans out there would be willing to pay the fare to get you over there since your bags are packed anyway. So let's go back to why Boston is so historic. Let's go to 1774. Actually, as early as 1770. So the Boston Massacre. And then from there, you'll have the Boston tea stuff, which is good times, right? Pouring the tea into the harbor. I am not a fan of tea. I think it's gross. I think it's very gross. Like, I don't know how you guys drink that stuff. It's like weirdly flavored water. But I also am not a big fan of coffee. I started to drink a little bit of coffee to help. I guess it's good for your liver. And I don't like it. I did the half coffee, half milk thing, but it tastes like dirt water. But that's just me. So a lot of stuff took place in Boston. The Boston Massacre. Control of the British ministry was now seized by the gifted but erratic Champagne Charlie Townshend, a man who would deliver brilliant speeches in Parliament while drunk, rashly promising to pluck feathers from the colonial goose with a minimum of squawking. He persuaded Parliament in 1767 to pass the Townshend Acts. The most important of these regulations was the light import duty on glass, white lead, paper, and tea. Okay, so I talked about that earlier this week. A clash was inevitable. On the evening of March 5th, 1770, a crowd of some 60 townspeople set upon a squad of about 10 bloody backs, one of whom was hit by a club, another of whom was knocked down. Acting apparently without orders, but under extreme provocation, the troops opened fire and killed or wounded 11 innocent citizens. One of the first to die was Crispy Attucks, described by contemporaries as a powerfully built runaway mulatto, and as a leader of the mob. Both sides, in some degree, were to blame. And in the subsequent trial, only 2 of the redcoats were found guilty of manslaughter. They were released after being branded on the hand. The so-called Boston Massacre further inflamed the colonials against the British, especially after the conviction spread that the Americans had been wholly unoffending. Paul Revere, an artist horseman, wrote, "Unhappy Boston, see thy sons deplored, thy hallowed walks be smeared with guiltless gore." Massacre Day was observed in Boston as a patriotic holiday until 1776, when the more glorious 4th of July eclipsed it. So Boston just has tons and tons of history. Let's go to the Boston Tea Party. Thus far, that is, by 1773, nothing happened to make rebellion inevitable. Non-importation was weakening. Increasing numbers of colonials were reluctantly paying the tea tax because the legal tea was now cheaper than the smuggled tea and cheaper than tea in England. Even John Adams on occasion hoped that the tea he was drinking was smuggled Dutch tea, but he could not be sure and did not want to know. A new ogre entered the picture in 1773. The powerful British East India Company, overburdened with 70 million pounds of unsold tea, was facing bankruptcy. If it collapsed, the London government would lose heavily in tax revenue. The ministry therefore decided to assist the company by awarding it a complete monopoly on the American tea business. The terms thus granted would enable the giant corporation to sell the coveted tea leaves more cheaply than ever before, even with the 3 pence tax added. But to many American consumers, principle was more important than price. If British officials insisted on the letter of the law, violence would be inevitable. For the new tea monopoly had many features that were hateful to the colonials. Above all, it seemed like a shabby attempt to trick the Americans with the bait of cheaper tea into acceptance of the detested tax. Faithfully, the British colonial authorities decided to enforce the law literally, and once more the colonials rose in their wrath. Not a single one of the several thousand chests of tea shipped to the company reached the hands of the consignees. At Annapolis, the Marylanders burned the cargo of the vessel while proclaiming liberty and independence, or death in pursuit of it. At Boston, which was host to the most famous tea party of all, a band of white townsfolk disguised as Indians boarded the 3 ships on December 16, 1773. They smashed open 342 chests and dumped the cursed weed into the harbor, while a silent crowd watched approvingly from the wharves as salty tea was brewed for the fish. So that's the famous Boston Tea Party episode. Now we go to, I want to go to, let's skip over to Patriots Day, because this involves, once again, the Boston Red Sox organization run by the Jewish community. So Boston has a holiday called Patriots Day, right? And it so it celebrates Lexington and Concord. And really hang a beautiful flag in the outfield. And this year, because MLB is seeking new revenue streams, they're going all in on offering as much new merchandise as possible on an annual basis, because suckers will buy it all. And I know somebody who purchases every new item that is put out by one of the teams. And the reason why he does this is because there's nothing else for him to live for. And as young men continue playing their video games and smoking their weed, they're not getting married and they're not having children. So they're the male version of the cat lady. And so they are the perfect target for your MLB to sell merchandise to. Their disposable income doesn't go toward their family. so they can spend it on MLB paraphernalia. And look, I understand. Um, I understand there's money in merchandise, right? In concerts, the bands make some money off of the tickets, but the real money is in the merchandise. And I get it. I get it. But this year, in conjunction with Nike, who we now know that is a company for China, put out new jerseys. And I don't want to over promote it, but the Patriots Day jersey that the Boston Red Sox organization put out on Patriots Day. So when you think Patriots Day, I would think that you think red, white, and blue. The Boston Marathon colors are yellow. I don't know what the meaning behind that is, but they're yellow. So these jerseys that were put out for Patriots Day were yellow, and no Americans modeled them. You had Alex Verdugo and two other guys that look, I don't know what they are, but they don't look American. And so that's this psyop, right? You are being bombarded with images, and it's obviously working. Being bombarded with images is helping Americans hate themselves. Americans feel guilty about themselves. Americans look down on themselves. So while Christian and Catholics get condemned by the community for using homosexual conversion therapy, the Jewish community is using the same tactics to turn Americans against their heritage, their lineage, their legacy. Sure. So obviously, the tactics used in homosexual conversion therapy do work. So what obviously the Boston Red Sox organization is trying to do is wean Boston Red Sox fans off of their patriotism and into whatever direction the organization is heading in under the leadership of Jews. And again, so Boston became heavy Irish. And we know that the Irish were protectionists in Boston, New York, and Northern California. There's an article that I found today because I was trying to. So again, I know history and I know what the Irish did to Asians in San Francisco, and I know that they did it to others. And so I was like, okay, so what's the deal with the Jews? I found an article published November 2nd, 2018, because I looked up, I was like, did the Irish attack Jews? And apparently, according to the Jews, they did. David Greenberg, which is obviously a Jew, wrote this article that the Irish attacked Jews, specifically in Boston, in the 1940s. In the 1940s, according to David Greenberg, who, let's take it with a grain of salt, claims that a right-wing group terrorized Jewish communities in Boston and New York while authorities looked the other way. Could it happen again? So they're good at this. I give credit where credit is due. The Jewish community is outstanding at this stuff. They play the victim card better than anybody else can. They play it better than Africans do. And so, okay, so apparently, according to this man, the Irish attacked Jews too. So that's probably one of the reasons why there is such an effort in Boston to attack what's left of the Irish community as far as Boston Red Sox fans go. Um, and how so I looked up the history specifically of Boston and the Irish. In 1884, Hugh O'Brien became the first Irish Catholic mayor of Boston, and notably the grandson of the Irish immigrants to Boston. Joseph P. Kennedy rose through the ranks of the Democratic Party in the first half of the 20th century. Uh, then that gave us the questionable Kennedys. And we know, right, that 1965, one of the Kennedys put forward an immigration bill that turned America upside down. But at the same time, in the 1960s, we know that America lost control of the country. And it had a lot to do with the Jewish community teaming up with the African community on civil rights. And then you have the Jewish community, African community, and MLB with integration in 1997. So obviously, the role of the Kennedys is questionable, right? Like, I mean, you've got the Detroit Irishman who decided to attack Cap Anson. I mean, people turn on their own culture, right? People turn on their heritage. It happens. But okay. So to wrap up, leading up to Independence Day 2021 week, I went through the most important founding documents, and I'm encouraging Americans to celebrate tomorrow or tonight, today, with gusto. You come from a wonderful legacy of philosophers and thinkers and scientists and inventors and entrepreneurs and ethical men. I need to read more Ralph Waldo Emerson. There's a great quote in here. We Americans will walk on our own feet. We will work with our own hands. We will speak our own minds. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the American scholar, 1837. There's a lot of parallels in the Declaration of Independence, the portion where Thomas Jefferson listed the grievances against the crown. There's a lot of parallels between what was happening then and what's happening right now. And adopting the label of rebels isn't such a bad thing if Americans are going to carry through with it. I hope that we do not encounter a civil war, because we have no idea how that's going to go, given that the American population stands at 60% and maybe 50% of you are already on the other side. We have no idea how that would go. I mean, how would things break up? Everyone didn't fight in the Revolutionary War. Everyone didn't fight in the Civil War. The Civil War didn't stretch out super fast. So where would the epicenter be of this new Civil War? That's something to think about. And then would each city be fighting its own version of it? Like, I don't think it would be a united front. I think it would be pockets of violence. And obviously, let's hope it doesn't go that far. But there needs to be a cleansing, and there needs to be removals, and some people need to make choices. People who aren't happy on American soil have a country of origin, and I mean, if your country of origin's Africa and you don't think highly of Africa, it sucks to be you. But there's plenty of opportunity in Africa for intelligent Africans to make the solar stuff happen over there. There's funding already. It's just nobody has set down the infrastructure. So those of you who want to build Wakanda, you've got massive spaces of land to do it. But people are going to have to make choices in the following few years. I mean, all we can do is hope for the best, but maybe like what happened with the colonists, hope is going to run out. Patrick Henry talked about that, right? You need to make a choice. We can hope for peace, but again, there's a lot of interests that are entrenched. Rouge covered a lot of that today. I haven't read the article on stakeholder capitalism, but he brought it up. So let's see what happens. Maybe stuff will blow over. Scott Presler is doing amazing work getting people registered to vote, getting people excited for 2022 in a peaceful manner. He uploaded a video discussing, he retweeted his plan, which he had set down earlier. I can't remember the date on the original video, but he quoted it when he retweeted it. And he says that he sticks to it. And it sounds to me like great work, a decentralized movement without wanting to go after a power grab. It's an individual. Some of you guys out there who you're obviously seeking a power grab. I can tell you that there's quite a few of you that, to me, you could be the future authoritarian. And if it got to that point, you would not have a lot of support, because we cannot keep going down the same roads. We've got to break these cycles. We need to stop putting people who are simply seeking power in power. It just keeps blowing up in the faces of the people who identify with the right. So I hope you guys have a wonderful Independence Day. And so for me, I will not be streaming tomorrow. I'm going to regroup and figure out my topics for the rest of July. August is Christy Mathewson's birthday, anniversary of his birthday. Babe Ruth passed away in August 1946. And then we've got something cool for Cy Young coming up in August too. Ty Cobb passed away 1960 something July. So I'm going to have an opportunity to talk about Ty Cobb in July on camera. And then I'm going to figure out some more topics to fill in the gaps for the remainder of July through August, when I get to the cool MLB stuff that I want to work on. And then when I start digging in, at that point, hopefully I will be streaming in the morning. It might not be on a daily basis. I have no idea if I truly have the stamina to do something like that, because you know that people on the right, we don't dedicate ourselves to one thing. We're multifaceted people who have families and work and pets and other stuff that we do. We're not dedicated activists. So we'll see how it goes. But I want to thank anybody who comes across these videos. I truly just love this country. And I know that people are going to have to make choices in the next few years. And hopefully we can rectify a lot of the stuff that's gone sideways. I believe there is a happy compromise or resolute solutions for a lot of people. So we'll see how it goes. Thank you again for following along this week. I'll see you guys next weekend, aiming for 9 p.m. following Saturday. Thank you again for your time. I hope you have a wonderful Independence Day.